Hello everyone and welcome back to the program. With the dust now settling on the recent U.S. presidential election, many prominent voices in Europe are calling for the EU, and for Germany in particular, to step up and fill the void left by an increasingly isolationist America. For nearly a century, the United States has been the undisputed leader of the free world. But with America now abdicating its lead role, Europe must step forward. That's what so many leaders and commentators are now saying. On today's program, we'll look at what another commentator had to say many years ago about a prophesied European superpower.
The Trumpet Daily.
GermanForeignPolicy.com recently wrote an article that was titled Superpower Europe. Now, some of you viewers may well remember that during his 50-year ministry, Hebert W. Armstrong often wrote about the same subject, Superpower Europe. It's just that Mr. Armstrong, he was writing that back in the 1950s, the 1960s. He wrote about that when the Soviet Empire completely dominated Eastern Europe. He was talking about the resurrection of an empire out of Europe when Germany was divided into two nations. He talked about it when the European Union didn't even exist. And yet there he was back in the 1950s and 60s, boldly proclaiming that there would be, sure enough, a United States of Europe to come right out of the heart of that continent. Here's one such example from his old radio program in the 1960s.
Gradually, and now faster and faster, a new power is being developed from underneath the surface, a new world power which the public now least suspects, which the world does not yet see, doesn't realize, doesn't dream is coming, but it is developing just as prophesied in Europe, a resurrected Roman Empire that will combine some 350 millions of population, a power so mighty that our Western peoples will stand aghast when it flashes suddenly into full being. Yes, your Bible says that the world will be startled.
That's what Hebert Armstrong was saying way back in the 1960s. And so when you see all these recent headlines, particularly following the U.S. election in November, headlines like Trump's victory shakes Europe's geopolitical order. The whole geopolitical order in Europe is being shaken. Other headlines, protecting Europe in the age of Trump. Another one from the EU Observer, EU crafts defense plan in Trump's shadow. They're concerned about defense now. They're talking about building an army. They're talking about more military cooperation. And then, of course, the one I mentioned there at the top from GermanForeignPolicy.com, Superpower Europe. That got our attention. It should get your attention, even if you just appreciate history. That kind of a headline should get your attention. Another one from the New York Times. Donald Trump's election leaves Angela Merkel as the liberal West's last defender. Germany's now the leader of the free world, many are saying. Another headline from Foreign Policy. The dawn of Pax Germanica. Not Pax Britannica, not Pax Americana. It's Pax Germanica. That's the headline from Foreign Policy. Here's one from a quote now from GermanForeignPolicy.com, this article I mentioned. Under German pressure, the EU is pushing toward the establishment of military structures independent of NATO. These structures could serve NATO, but in the end are suitable for an EU army. Leading European foreign policy makers called the EU a superpower. So that's what they're calling it now. Now they're calling for the formation of an EU army. They're worried that the NATO umbrella won't always be there. And so Europe is moving forward. And again, Hebert Armstrong talked about this decades ago. He said first there'd be the union of nations coming together. Then he said there's going to be a common currency. They have to have that. And he's saying this again back in the 50s, decades ago. And then he said, sure enough, this final resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire, we'll get into that in the next segment, it has to have a common military force as well. That's what we see happening. Continuing, it says, the decisions taken by the EU defense ministers at their meeting that was in November, largely meet the demands for the enhanced EU military cooperation that Berlin, for years, has been pushing for, particularly since last summer. I mean, for years, Germany's been pushing for this. And now it's really gaining momentum. It says the official founding of an EU army is out of the question for as long as the UK is still a member of the EU. Well, how about that? Look at how much has happened just this year. You have the U.S. presidential election giving this talk momentum. And before that, you have the Brexit vote back in June. It says later, London considers NATO structures sufficient and has no interest in building a counterforce to the USA. London has no interest in building a counterforce, but Britain's on the way out. And Europe very much does have an interest in building this counterforce. It's worried that it's going to have to protect itself. As I say, the NATO umbrella is beginning to unravel. It's really beginning to fall apart. And you look at the movement of some of these prophecies. Again, this is now Politico. It says, as U.S. President-elect Donald Trump began choosing his senior White House staff on Monday, EU officials agreed to push ahead with greater military cooperation outside the existing NATO alliance. It says the plan for greater military cooperation, pushed by Germany, France, Italy, and Spain, took on new urgency after Trump's victory. That's what we see. The more these headlines come out, you see more and more urgency. There's just a greater sense of urgency in Europe like never before. I mean, you look at the rise, too, of all these nationalist parties. And really, that's just Europe returning to its historical roots. We'll get more into that, as I say, in the next segment. But I mean, the geopolitical order, it's being dramatically restructured right before our eyes. And these events are happening fast, and your Bible has something to say about it. There was another piece at Foreign Policy, that one about the dawn of Pax Germanica. Germany now rising to the fore. After the election in November, the one in the United States, the German chancellor offered conditional support. How's that for turning the tables? It's now Germany saying, well, we might support you. If you uphold our ideals, our values, we might offer our support. This is from that Foreign Policy piece. The day after Trump's victory, Europeans and especially Germans are looking at their world with new eyes and wholly unprepared for a Trump victory. They're completely flummoxed by what they see. With Trump's election, Germans are standing in front of a black hole. That's what one commentator had to say. It says further, the world could change for Germany in a way greater even than it did with the fall of the wall. That's the Berlin Wall. It says another commentator, publisher of the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung newspaper, declared, if Trump does in foreign policy what he promised in the campaign, then the already stressed Atlantic Alliance and geopolitical structures, system of the West, are facing a revolution. I mean, if he just follows through and does what he says he would, you're going to see that alliance unravel, the alliance between Europe and the United States. And when that happens, I mean, that is significant. This is not something that we can be casual about, particularly when you look into the Bible and see what God says about a seventh and final resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire. I mean, we're really talking about a geopolitical earthquake. And it's talked about, the history and the prophecy. It's talked about in this fantastic booklet, The Holy Roman Empire in Prophecy. We're going to get into Revelation chapter 17 in the next segment and some of the content from this booklet. But look, for 70 plus years, this Atlantic alliance that formed in the wake of World War II, there to prevent Soviet expansion, but also, I mean, it was to prevent another German empire from forming. It was to prevent Germany from ever remilitarizing itself. I mean, and that held for 70 plus years, that world order. And you had all of these shared interests between the United States and Europe, and the free trade and the collective security structures, and especially NATO. And now, as I say, you see that NATO umbrella. There's talk of it not being there for much longer. And so Europe is taking matters into its own hands, talking about its own military defense. This is from, again, Foreign Policy. It says, Berlin is suddenly much more important to maintaining any semblance of the current order for the simple reason that there's no one else to take the wheel. There's no one else leading. The United States isn't leading like it once did. And so most Europeans recognized long ago that the post-war Atlantic Alliance's ambitions had shrunk since the Cold War. Well, then it just goes on to give some of the history through previous U.S. administrations. And now, though, I mean, you see Europe, as I say, you see the push to build this common military. You see it really, really gaining some momentum. That article goes on and says that with the election and then Brexit before that, it's like Europe's really getting a wake-up call. And we've had a lot to say about this all through this year, not just with our booklets, but of course with our Trumpet magazine. If you haven't subscribed yet to the Trumpet, you can go to thetrumpet.com or thetrumpet.co.uk and get a free subscription today. Or you can also tune in to our daily radio broadcasts about so many of these significant prophetic events on kpcg.fm. We produce a daily radio program and many others as well, but a daily radio program that really does zero in on the significant prophecies of our day, prophecies that are being fulfilled, that are happening right before our eyes. It says further, Germany's defense minister, this is Foreign Policy again, Ursula von der Leyen, said Trump's election could provide an important stimulus to upgrading the EU's military capacity and bolstering its structures. Then it quotes Jean-Claude Juncker, has again brought up the possibility of an EU army, an idea that has been periodically rolled out and then quickly mothballed in the past, but could find more traction under a President Trump. I mean, it's been talked about and discussed for many years, in fact. But now it's beginning to gain traction. Now it's finally, they're beginning to take it seriously. Discussions about a common military force. I mean, this is, as I say, very significant. So much prophetic significance to these developments. It goes right back to what Hebert Armstrong was talking about, as I said earlier, many decades ago. Here's one more example from Hebert Armstrong's old television program. This is from 1978.
Now, a united Europe will bring about a power, a superpower, because the nations of Europe want to unite. They just don't know how to do it. And it's possible that the now present Pope may, or a future one, however it may be, extend his good offices to help them bring about what they would like to have in Europe, not only economical cooperation, but an absolute political union with a common currency and a common military force. There is a great deal of nuclear power and weapons over there belonging to the United States, but which they could easily just take over.
That's Hebert Armstrong from 1978. And I mean, even today, it's a shocking quote, I know. But it's becoming harder and harder for people to scoff at what he was saying. You can maybe scoff back in 1978 or back in the 1960s. But look at what's happening today. And as I said earlier, look at the headlines. And he was right on with the Union of Nations. He was right on with the common currency. And now you see all the discussion. It's gaining traction. The formation of this common military force. So much of this history and prophecy is discussed in this wonderful book, The Holy Roman Empire and Prophecy. Make sure that you stay tuned during the break here and jot down the information you need to either call our operators or send us a text message or to go online to our websites, whatever's easiest. But make sure that you do order the free material that we offer today. We'll be right back.
European leaders who seek to forge the fractured continent into a unified superpower are working from an extraordinary historical model, the Holy Roman Empire. Since the days of Justinian in the 6th century, this powerful church-state combine has repeatedly risen to dominate the continent. modern advances of European unification applaud the cultural, economic, and political accomplishments of this empire. But an honest look at history reveals a sinister side of its legacy, and aspects of the way the continent is coming together today are beginning to recall that dark past. The fact that Europe's architects want to resurrect the Holy Roman Empire makes this history a prophecy of Europe's future. If you want to grasp the true nature of the political religious project unfolding in Europe, and even to know Europe's future and how it will shape the world and impact every nation on earth, you need to read The Holy Roman Empire in Prophecy. Email your request to td@kpcg.fm or visit thetrumpet.com.
The Holy Roman Empire is spoken of in multiple prophecies in both the Old and New Testaments. And the one passage that we're going to examine in this segment is Revelation 17. And we've gone through this before, but get your Bible and read along once again. And as we study this chapter, keep in mind that this was written more than 400 years before the Holy Roman Empire even came into existence. And yet this pivotal prophetic chapter gives such a detailed and thorough explanation of this empire's nature and its motives and its leadership and all of its accomplishments throughout history. Let's notice Revelation 17, just speaking more broadly for a moment, the book of Revelation as a whole contains prophecy for the end time. It's about things which shall be hereafter, as it says in Revelation 1, or events that would occur after John's lifetime. John wrote it, of course, in the first century. Again, you can read that in the first chapter, Revelation 1 and verse 19. Now, Revelation 17 was written by the Apostle John around AD 90, and the specific purpose of this chapter is to describe the judgment of the great whore that sits upon many waters. That's in Revelation 17 and verse 1. This great whore symbolizes a great religious institution. But this chapter also has a lot to say about nations or kingdoms in the latter days. Let's notice Revelation 17 here, and verse 3. It says, "So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns." So here is this woman, or this harlot, and she's straddling the beast. And a woman, if you look in Ephesians 5 or in 2 Corinthians 11, you can see how that a woman is a type of a church. In this case, a great false church, a great universal system. And so the scene here in Revelation 17 is of this woman riding or straddling a beast. A religion that's brandishing all of this political power, guiding this political beast, guiding kingdoms or nations. You can look also in verse 2 and it talks about how the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. Also down in verse 18, how that she reigns over the kings of the earth. And so you see this church-state union. Revelation 17 couldn't be more clear. I mean, it's talking about a religious organization that's incredibly wealthy. It has a global presence and influence. It's a potent force in politics, straddling the beast. That's what your Bible says. It goes on and says about this woman, verse 5, "And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth." This woman, her history or her roots go all the way back to ancient Babylon. Ancient Babylon, and now it's just grown great, and it's spread all over the earth among many nations, many different languages. And this mother of harlots, it puts it that way because she has a lot of daughter churches that broke away in protest. They rebelled against the authority in that great universal church, But really, there's not a lot of difference when you look at the doctrines and the beliefs and the traditions of the mother or the daughters. A lot of the same customs, a lot of the same traditions. Verse 6, it says, "And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration." So here are God's true saints, God's people, the people that this woman lives to persecute, to destroy even. In verse 7, notice this, "And the angel said unto me, Wherefore did you marvel? I'll tell you the mystery of the woman and the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. Why do you marvel? Let the Bible interpret itself." Notice what my father had to say. This is in the Royal Book of Revelation, this quote. Actually, no, Daniel unlocks Revelation, also by my father. It says, "There are parts of Revelation that people in general could understand better if they would put the pieces together and face basic facts." Here he's talking about Revelation 17. Here is depicted a woman riding a beast, meaning a church will be guiding a political entity. He says if people would face basic facts like these, they could understand the book of Revelation better. It just takes a little bit of study. That's what he's saying. It takes some willingness on your part to really dig in and to understand these prophecies. And you will have to do some digging because Satan has done his best to blot out this record, this history. He hates these prophecies. But you can go back even a century and a half ago and look at some of the more common commentaries from the mid-19 or the mid-1800s and see where there was just more of a basic awareness of who these nations represented and who the woman is. Today, a lot of that has been blotted out. Look down in verse 10. It says, "And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short space." These 7 kings, 7 distinct kingdoms, 7 successive kingdoms or empires. The Holy Roman Empire, and I won't get into all the details here about the other is not yet come. That's just really, it has to do with the timing of when these revelations would be made known in the latter days. Hebert Armstrong, I've played clips for you already, but he came on the scene during the time of the 6th resurrection. The other one didn't yet come until after Mr. Armstrong died. And that's the one that's now forming in Europe. Verse 12 continues, "And the 10 horns," now this is talking about concurrent kings, 10 that come together. There's the 7 heads, the 7 resurrections, but then the 10 horns, it says, "which you saw are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast." That's referring to the United States of Europe. The 10 horns here, part of that 7th head. These are contemporaneous. They're the same as the 10 toes in Daniel 2. 10 kings, 10 kingdoms, or 10 groups. Verse 13 says, "These have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast." They have one mind. Now it's a short-lived empire or kingdom because if you look at them, I mean really they're 10 disparate parts. In many ways they seem mismatched, but that's the way the Bible describes them in Daniel 2. It's a mixture of iron and clay. But when they come together and give their mind to the beast, and the woman again is straddling the beast, then they're going to come together unified for that short period. Verse 14 it says, this is what it leads to, "These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful." Now, is this important for us to study? You see what it leads to. It leads right to the return of Jesus Christ. This kingdom, this empire that's now forming in Europe, and eventually it's going to go head to head with Jesus himself. It's an end-time prophecy. Now, let me give you a quote. This is again from the Holy Roman Empire in prophecy. It says here on page 8, "This vision is obviously about a towering church, a wealthy, imperialistic, ambitious religion presiding over the rise of 7 distinct empires or kingdoms, each ruled by a specific king. And this woman uses her influence over each empire to try and destroy the true saints of God. Now the history, that's why this book is so important, the history of all of those distinct empires, it's covered here. I mean, it's in your history book too, but it's all brought together here in one textbook. And then also, the prophecies of God are discussed along with it. It says further, if you read to the end of this book, speaking of the Holy Roman Empire and prophecy, you'll come to appreciate how perfect this description, Revelation 17 that is, this description of the Holy Roman Empire is. The Holy Roman Empire that is recorded and discussed in countless history books. It says the Holy Roman Empire, whose history is still plainly evident in the cathedrals and castles, the ruins and battlefields, the symbols and memorabilia, the customs and practices of Europe today. Most significantly, you'll see what an apt description it is of the Holy Roman Empire currently being resurrected in Europe. That's the prophecy. That's the prophecy. You'll see in Revelation 17. It's just a perfect description. And so make sure that you do get these 2 free booklets. I haven't talked much about this one. We haven't offered it very often on this show, but Unveiled at Last, the Royal Book of Revelation. This will assist you in your study of this wonderful prophetic book, the book of Revelation, but this one too, the Holy Roman Empire in prophecy. Stay tuned. Get the information you need to request your free literature today. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.